I believe that if you want humanity to go to space, then you have to believe in AI and its potential to solve the manifold problems that humanity has scientifically. And so I think if we're looking at Mars or Jupiter or Saturn and we want to land on those planets, we're going to want to have autonomous, artificially intelligent robots that can essentially terraform those places for us before we eventually arrive there. It makes no sense to send fragile human biological bodies to a place without having even like hundreds of AI robots, humanoid and or just generally autonomous robots on those places way before we get there. So those are two things that I think people don't like, right? I think there's a lot of people out there who think that colonizing planets outside of Earth makes no sense because we have a planet that we have today. Why are we bothering? And also people don't like AI in general as well. So it's two terrible things that paint me out to be an accelerationist, etc. But I've always loved space. I've always believed in space, and I feel like maybe it's time to revisit this old letter that was written in 1970. So there is this Catholic nun named Mary Jacunda who wrote to Dr. Ernst Stuhlinger, who was the then director of science at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. And I figure it's worth, reading that once again, because I think he was really articulate about why we go to space. And I think it's really important because it speaks to, at least to me, what makes being human special and what makes being exploration and science and all of that special. So let's read it. Welcome to Reader's Corner. So in 1970, a Zambia-based nun named Sister Mary Jacunda wrote to Dr. Ernst Zulinger, then Associate Director of Science at Marshall Space Flight Center. In response to his ongoing research piloted into a piloted mission to Mars, specifically, she asked how he could suggest billions of dollars on such a project at a time when so many children were starving on Earth. Stuhlinger soon sent the following letter of explanation to Sister Jacunda, along with a copy of Earthrise, this beautiful photograph here, classic. The above photograph of Earth taken in 1968 by astronaut William Anders from the moon. His thought reply was later published by NASA entitled "Why Explore Space." Dear sister, your letter was one of many which are reaching me every day, but it has touched me more deeply than all the others because it came so much from the depths of a searching mind and a compassionate heart. I will try to answer your question as best as I possibly can. First, however, I would like to express my great admiration for you and for all your many brave sisters because you are dedicating your lives to the noblest cause of man, help for his fellow men who are in need. You asked in your letter how I could suggest the expenditures of billions of dollars for a voyage to Mars, which ironically is where we're at today, right, with SpaceX. At a time when many children on this earth are starving to death. I know that you do not expect an answer such as, I did not know that there are children dying from hunger, but from now on I will desist from any kind of space research until mankind has solved the problem. In fact, I have known of famine children long before I knew that a voyage to the planet Mars is technically feasible. However, I believe, like many of my friends, that traveling to the moon and eventually to Mars and to other planets is a venture which we should undertake now, and I even believe that this project in the long run will contribute more to the solution of these grave problems we are facing here on Earth than many other potential projects of help which are debated and discussed year after year and which are so extremely slow in yielding tangible results. Before trying to describe in more detail how our space program is contributing to the solution of our earthly problems, I would like to relate briefly a supposedly true story which may help support the argument. About 400 years ago, there lived a count in a small town in Germany. He was one of the benign counts, and he gave a large part of his income to the poor in his town. This was much appreciated because poverty was abundant during medieval times, and there were epidemics of the plague which ravaged the country frequently. One day, the count met a strange man. He had a workbench and a little laboratory in his house, and he labored hard during the daytime so that he could afford a few hours every evening to work in his laboratory. He ground small lenses from pieces of glass, he mounted the lenses in tubes, and he used these gadgets to look at very small objects. The Count was particularly fascinated by the tiny creatures that could be observed with a strong magnification, and which he had never seen before. He invited the man to move with his laboratory to the castle to become a member of the Count's household and to devote henceforth all his time to the development and the perfection of his optical gadgets as a special employee of the Count. The townspeople, however, became angry when they realized that the Count was wasting his money, as they thought, on a stunt without purpose. "We are suffering from this plague," they said, "while he is paying that man for a useless hobby." But the Count remained firm. "I give you as much as I can afford," he said, "but I will also support this man and his work because I know that someday something will come of it." Indeed, something very good came out of this work and also out of similar work done by others at other places: the microscope. It is well known that the microscope has contributed more than any other invention to the progress of medicine, and that the elimination of the plague and many other contagious diseases from most parts of the world is largely a result of studies which the microscope made possible. The Count, by retaining some of his spending money for research and discovery, contributed far more to the relief of human suffering than he could have contributed by giving all he could possibly spare to his plague-ridden community. Such a good story. Right. And it frames it in such a, just such a great story. And I think this is kind of where I think AI sits and space exploration both sit. So I think it's pertinent to me, like, that why is it that today we are playing around with AI that can do all the jobs of most humans, like productivity work and creative work, when maybe the output at the end of that road, from right now, the Gen AI is a microscope, and tomorrow it is, the penicillin of the future, right? The situation which we are facing today is similar in many respects. The President of the United States is spending about $200 billion in his yearly budget. This month, money goes to health, education, welfare, urban renewal, highways, transportation, foreign aid, defense, conservation, science, agriculture, and many installations inside and outside the country. About 1.6% of this national budget was allocated to space exploration this year. The space program includes Project Apollo and many other smaller projects in space physics, space astronomy, space biology, planetary objects, Earth resources projects, and space engineering. To make this expenditure for the space program possible, the average American taxpayer with $10,000 income per year is paying about $30 tax dollars for space. The rest of his income, $970, remains for his subsistence, his recreation, his savings, his other taxes, and all his other expenditures. You will probably ask now, why don't you take $5 or $3 or $1 out of the 30 space dollars which the average American taxpayer is paying and send these dollars to the hungry children? To answer this question, I have to explain briefly how the economy of this country works. The situation is very similar in other countries. The government consists of a number of departments: Interior, Justice, Health, Education, Welfare, Transportation, Justice, and others, and the bureaus: National Science Foundation, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and others. All of them prepare their yearly budgets according to their assigned missions, and each of them must defend its budget against extremely severe screening by congressional committees, and against heavy pressure for economy from the Bureau of Budget and the President. When the funds are finally appropriated by Congress, they can be spent only for the line items specified and approved in the budget. This is getting very detailed admin here. The budget of the NASA naturally can contain only items directly related to aeronautics and space. If this budget were not approved by Congress, the funds proposed for it would not be available for something else. They would simply not be levied from the taxpayer unless one of the other budgets had obtained approval for a specific increase, which would then absorb the funds not spent for space. This is a very crucial detail here, right? That would not be levied from the taxpayer. You realize from this brief discourse that support for hungry children, or rather support in addition to what the United States is already contributing to this very worthy cause in the form of foreign aid, can be obtained only if the appropriate department submits a budget line item for this purpose, and if this line item is then approved by Congress. You may ask now whether I personally would be in favor of such a move by our government. My answer is an emphatic yes. Indeed, I would not mind at all if my annual taxes were increased by a number of dollars for the purpose of feeding hungry children wherever they may live. I know that all of my friends would feel the same way. However, we could not bring such a program to life merely by desisting from making plans for voyages to Mars. On the contrary, I even believe that by working for the space program, I can make some contribution to the relief and eventual solution of such grave problems as poverty and hunger on Earth. Basic to the hunger problem are two functions: the production of food and the distribution of food. Food production by agriculture, cattle ranching, ocean fishing, and other large-scale operations is efficient in some parts of the world, but drastically deficient in many others. For example, large areas of land could be utilized far better if efficient methods of watershed control, fertilizer use, weather forecasting, fertility assessment, plantation program, field selection, planting habits, timing of cultivation, crop survey, and harvest planning were applied. Now, this is interesting because I see, people are saying they don't want robots in their home, they don't want robots around, but at the same time, we're seeing massive investments in robots in agriculture. In fact, I heard recently about there is a robotics company that is fully managing 1 million acres from planting to harvesting with no humans involved. And so and one of the reasons why that it has been said to be a solution is because, look, as the climate change gets worse, it's going to be more difficult and harder for human farmers to cultivate land in hotter areas of the world. So there is a logic here that it could help us with climate change. Not to mention, maybe there's a lot of areas where robots can help to cultivate, like the rainforest, the jungles, the forests, etc. Maybe it can help with the Sahara Desert, this kind of things. I wonder if robots can help us with climate change in very direct ways. Anyway, the best tool for the improvement of all these functions undoubtedly is the artificial Earth satellite. Circling the globe at a high altitude, it can screen wide areas of land within a short time. It can observe and measure a large variety of factors indicating the status and condition of crops, soil, droughts, rainfall, snow cover, etc., and it can radio this information of ground stations for appropriate use. It has been estimated that even a modest system of Earth satellites equipped with Earth resources, sensors, working within a program for worldwide agricultural improvements will increase the yearly crops by an equivalent of many billions of dollars. So, you don't even need robots, right, to justify space. The distribution of the food to the needy is a completely different problem. The question is not much one of a shipping volume. It is one of international cooperation. The ruler of a small nation may feel very uneasy about the prospect of having large quantities of food shipping into his country by a large nation, simply because he fears that along with the food there may also be an import of influence and foreign power. Efficient relief from hunger, I'm afraid, will not come before the boundaries between nations have become less divisive than they are today. I do not believe that spaceflight will accomplish this miracle overnight. However, the space program is certainly among the most promising and powerful agents working in this direction. Now, this is, of course, 1970, right? So Cold War, but also space cooperation. Let me only remind you of the recent near tragedy of Apollo 13, when the time of crucial re-entry of the astronauts approached. The Soviet Union discontinued all Russian radio transmissions in the frequency bands used by the Apollo project in order to avoid any possible interference, and the Russian ships stationed themselves in the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans in case an emergency rescue would become necessary. Had the astronaut capsule touched down near a Russian ship, the Russians would undoubtedly have expended as much care and effort in their rescue as if Russian cosmonauts had returned from the space trip. If Russian space travelers should ever be in a similar emergency situation, Americans would do the same without any doubt. That's a beautiful sentiment. I wonder if that's still true today. I wonder if China would do the same thing with American astronauts. Unclear. I feel like they would, but we do cooperate on a lot of other things already, right? Higher food production through survey and assessment from orbit, and better food distribution through improved international relations are only two examples of how profoundly the space program will impact life on Earth. I would like to quote two other examples: stimulation of technological development and generation of scientific knowledge. Now, this goes back to his earlier story, right? The requirements for high precision and for extreme reliability, which must be imposed upon the components of a moon-traveling spacecraft, are entirely unprecedented in the history of engineering. The development of systems which meet these severe requirements has provided us a unique opportunity to find new material and methods to invent better technical systems, to manufacturing procedures, to lengthening the lifetimes of instruments, and even to discover new laws of nature. All this newly acquired technical knowledge is also available for application to earthbound technologies. Every year, about 1,000 technical innovations generated in the space program find their ways into our earthly technology, where they lead to better kitchen appliances and farm equipment, better sewing machines and radios, better ships and airplanes, better weather forecasting and storm warning, better communications, better medical instruments, better utensils and tools for everyday life. Presumably, you will ask now why we must develop first a life support system for our moon-traveling astronauts before we can build a remote reading sensor system for heart patients. The answer is simple. Significant progress in the solutions of technical problems is frequently made not by a direct approach, but by first setting a goal of high challenge which offers a strong motivation for innovative work, which fires the imagination and spurs men to expend their best efforts, and which acts as a catalyst by including chains of other reactions. Beautifully said. Spaceflight, without any doubt, is playing exactly this role. The voyage to Mars will certainly not be a direct source of food for the hungry. However, it will lead to many new technologies and capabilities that the spin-offs from this project alone will be worthy many times the cost of its implementation. And I think this is also a sentiment that I have about AI, right? Where, yes, like as I said earlier, yes, maybe like this goal of an AGI is potentially damaging, but the resultant technologies that come out of it, as many have talked about, can be manifold. Solving of cancer, changing the way that we approach creativity, changing the way that we approach our own lives and our health and all of that, right? And that can have some real great benefit. Besides the need for new technologies, there's a continuing great need for new basic knowledge in the sciences if we wish to improve the conditions of human life on Earth. We need more knowledge in physics and chemistry and biology and physiology, and very particularly in medicine to cope with all these problems which threatens men's life, hunger, disease, contamination of food and water, pollution of the environment. We need more young men and women who choose science as a career, and we need better support for those scientists who have the talent and determination to engage in fruitful research work. Agree. Challenging research objectives must be available, and sufficient support for research projects must be provided. Again, this space program, with its wonderful opportunities to engage in truly magnificent research, studies of moons and planets, of physics and astronomy, of biology and medicine, it is an almost ideal catalyst which induces the reaction between the motivation for scientific work, opportunities to observe exciting phenomena of nature, and material support needed to carry out research effort. Now, I agree with this, like this, something very powerful about inspiring people. And I think that does have a direct impact on getting people to do things, right? To do real work that results in like progress that gets in the hands of the average person, right? Like the innovations around, hey, like Apple creating an iPhone and it feeling like a toy at first, and it's just a tool to talk on the phone, listen to music, resulted in billions of people getting access to the internet, right? And yes, there are negative knock-on effects of that, but it's a fact that the internet has changed people's lives for the better as well. Among all of the activities which are directed, controlled, and funded by the American government, the space program is certainly the most visible and probably the most debated activity, although it consumes only 1.6% of the total national budget, and per 3 mille, less than 1/3 of 1%, I see, of the gross national product. As a stimulant and catalyst for the development of new technologies and for research in the basic sciences, it is unparalleled by any other activity. In this respect, we may even say that the space program is taking over a function which for 3,000 or 4,000 years has been the sad prerogative of wars. I mean, this is so true, right? War has definitely been the place where people have put a lot of technology, a lot of innovation, and a lot of energy for technological progress. How much human suffering can be avoided if nations, instead of competing with their bomb-dropping fleets of airplanes and rockets, compete with their moon-traveling spaceships? This competition is full of promise for brilliant victories, but if it leaves no room for the bitter fate of the vanquished, which breeds nothing but revenge and new wars. Although our space program seems to lead us away from our Earth and out toward the moon, the sun, the planet, and the stars, I believe that none of these celestial objects will find as much attention and study by space scientists as our Earth. It will become a better Earth, not only because of all the new technological and scientific knowledge which we will apply to the betterment of life, but also because we are developing a far deeper appreciation of our Earth, of life, and of man. The photograph which I enclose with this letter shows a view of our Earth as seen from Apollo 8 when it orbited the moon at Christmas, 1968. Of all the many wonderful results of the space program so far, this picture may be the most important one. It opened our eyes to the fact that our Earth is a beautiful and most precious island in an unlimited void, and that there is no other place for us to live but the thin surface layer of our planet, bordered by the bleak nothingness of space. Never before did so many people recognize how limited our Earth really is, and how perilous it would be to tamper with its ecological balance. Ever since this picture was first published, voices have become louder and louder, warning of the grave problems that confront man in our times: pollution, hunger, poverty, urban living, food production, water control, overpopulation. It is certainly not by accident that we begin to see the tremendous tasks waiting for us at a time when the young space age has provided us the first good look at our own planet. And now I love this sentiment because space on one side is exactly as he says, right? And I think going back to the moon, going back to Mars, going to Saturn, Jupiter, and farther away, and doing it in more and more high definition on social media, on media, reminds us of Earth in a way that I think this photo did, right? And continues to. But making it more and more visceral, I think it not only inspires people to pursue the sciences, but it also reminds humanity that we are humanity and we are this fragile humanity on Earth. At the same time, the other side of this is that AI, like, to what extent is AI doing the same thing that space is doing for us in terms of a psychological, a consciousness level? Because I think AI is going to challenge us to rethink how we think about intelligence, how we think about meaning, how we think about our place in the universe and our value in the universe. And I think that's also important. It's probably gonna lead to a new range of philosophies that help us to see what is the true value of humanity in a world where there are beings or entities that are more intelligent than us. So very fortunately, though, the space age not only holds out a mirror in which we can see ourselves, it also provides us with the technologies, the challenge, the motivation, and even with the optimism to attack these tasks with confidence. What we learn in our space program, I believe, is fully supporting what Albert Schweitzer had in mind when he said, "I am looking at the future with concern, but with good hope." My very best wishes will always be with you and with your children. Very sincerely yours, Ernst Stuhlinger. So that's the letter, Why We Explore Space. It's Why I Explore Space. It's just a beautiful sentiment. Could not sum it up better. And I really do feel like it's a letter for our times that applies to AI in a unique way. So curious to know what do you think of that? I mean, I'm really responding to a lot of people who have been giving me feedback about why AI is dangerous and why space is, and of course it's wrapped up in how Elon wants to go to Mars and all that. And I hear that argument over and over again, like, why are we going to space when we have this Earth to contend with? And I think this letter answers it beautifully. So thanks for listening, and hope to see you another time.